and thanks for clicking into another edition of Sit Down with Ed Brown. Today's guest needs absolutely no introduction at all. She's an author. She's a researcher. She's a speaker. Mrs. Kathy Strain. Hi, Kathy. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Listen, I want to say real quick how really cool and awesome it was to actually get to hang out with you at Bigfoot. That was the first time I got to meet you, and it was really cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we had a great time. It was a wonderful event. It was great to meet you and everybody, and it was just a good time. Probably one of the best times I've had in a long time.
Oh, Todd and Diane do a great job with that event. It was the first one I had been to, so I was ecstatic. I was actually like a fan going to. In fact, I told Todd that I felt like a kid at the All-Star game. That's how I felt. That was my analogy. But it was really cool. And I would like to spend more time with you, but every time I looked over there, you had 30 people around you. You're so well liked. You're so well known. I mean, I was going through pictures, and I want to point this out real quick, just for everybody who's listening, just so you know what kind of person she is. I'm going through pictures online of Bigfoot, and I kid you not, everybody who was there, including myself, had a one-on-one shot picture taken with Kathy Strain. Everybody. I'm even convinced that as cars drove by down the street, they were stopping, walking down, getting a picture taken with Kathy, and then walking back up the car and driving on. It's insane. So that's really cool. People love Kathy.
Well, yeah, I know a lot of those people. I mean, I've been a Bigfooter for a long time, and have known those people for a very long time. It was seeing family again. So, I mean, that's how it felt, was just like a family reunion. So I just really super enjoyed it.
Sure. And everybody enjoyed it. I didn't see anybody having a bad time.
No, nobody was having a bad time.
No, it was fun. And a special thanks goes out to Todd and Diane for what they do. It was an excellent time, and I thank them so much for allowing me to join that this year, and it was definitely a memory that I'll treasure forever.
Yeah.
So, Kathy, let's move on. Let's get on with this. Tell us a little about yourself. I mean, what is it you do for a living?
Well, I work for the United States Forest Service, Stanislaus National Forest in California, and I have a very long title, but I'm the Heritage Resource and Tribal Relations Program Manager, which means I'm the head archaeologist and head anthropologist for the forest, and I have a staff that works under me. And our responsibilities are to, before we do any kind of timber sale or put in a new campground or light a fire, for prescribed fire, it's actually federal law that we go and look at that land before that activity happens and then protect any Native American or European, so prehistoric or historic site. And so we spend a lot of time in the field. We make decisions on what is the best management of those resources, because sometimes I don't mind if fire goes through a site because there's no wood features of that site left, and it's better for the site for it to burn, or we collect artifacts, so we conduct excavations and see what's subsurface and those types of things. And then I spend a lot of time with the tribes because they still use the forest, and we go to sacred areas, and we go to where they gather plants, and we do protection measures for those as well. And sometimes we light those on fire too. And so it's a lot of fun. I mean, I'm outside a lot, which I love. I work with people a lot, which I love, and I really have a great job and just enjoy every bit of it. And I have a great staff, and I work for a great, beautiful forest. We're right adjacent to Yosemite National Forest, so it's just gorgeous. The one thing that isn't so much fun is we had the largest wildfire in the Sierra Nevadas 2 years ago. It's known as the Rim Fire, and it burned 257,000 acres. And we're still, it's devastating, and we're still dealing with the aftermath of that, of getting the burned trees out, getting the sites that need restoration, repaired, helping the meadows, because it just was such a devastating effect to so many acres that it's just taking a long time. And that gets a little old sometimes, where you just wish you could see something green once in a while. And,
sure.
and so I kind of miss that a little bit. I've been out seeing other places that are not devastated by fire, and that's been very pleasant to deal with. But
sure.
not as frequent.
How long does it take after a fire ravishes an area like that? I mean, how long does it take until you see some green again? I mean,
well, it depends on the area. Several of these areas, and one area in particular known as Jawbone, we call it the Jawbone area, was just utterly nuked. The trees boiled within their own bark, and so they aren't salvageable because there's no technically any wood left there. That was the best deer habitat that we had on the forest. It was very famous. There's a well-known researcher named Leopold that based how deer herds move on a landscape where he did all his research, and deer haven't even come back yet because there's nothing to eat. And the outer layers of the forest where we kind of had put in the fuel breaks and stuff to try to stop it from running all the way, up the hill, those areas didn't quite burn as hot. It was more of a ebb. And they've got plants coming back, but depending on what was in the soil, what seed source, native plants are coming back in some places, but then we have weeds coming back where we had a lot of recreation beforehand, where people on their tires brought in weeds, and those weeds are really doing very well because they like the burned environment. And so it's different in different places, but as far as trees coming back, it's going to be a good 100 years before that area is considered a forest again, for sure.
That's a lot longer than I would have guessed, so that is devastating.
Yes, devastating.
So, during your work, I mean, was it something at work? Were you already a quote unquote Bigfooter before you started working there, or was it your job and you just got some interest? How did that work? How did that come about?
Well, actually, so I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in anthropology, and the reason I went into anthropology was when I was a little girl, I had saw the movie Legend of Boggy Creek.
Of course.
And it was I still remember the whole experience of just being horrified and thrilled and all that stuff all at the same time. And it was just something that really stuck with me as being very interesting. And I had asked the teacher probably around 5th or 6th grade, what do I need to do to study Bigfoot? How do I get to do this for a living? And she said, well, you probably would need to be an anthropologist. And I was like, okay. And so that's always just part of who I was. And I ended up really actually having a natural draw to anthropology anyway. The rest of my family is all nurses. And so we have a sympathetic personality anyway, and anthropology is just sympathy and history, kind of thing. And I really enjoyed it, and I had the opportunity after I got my degree, I got to be seasonal on the Sequoia National Forest, which is just outside my hometown of Porterville. And even though I had known Native Americans from the Tule River Indian Reservation and had seen the I had seen the hairy man pictographs or painted rock pictographs when I was in high school. The relevance of it didn't come to me until we were doing an excavation, and I was working with the tribal elders from the reservation, and I had my oldest son with me. He's a natural redhead, and he had flaming red hair. And they just loved to have him at our meetings. And so I would always go after hours and bring him to the meetings. And then one day we're sitting there talking, and one of the elders goes, do you know what the painted rock, what it represents? And I said, I kind of think I do. I said, I kind of heard that it's related to Bigfoot, and which I find interesting because I believe in Bigfoot. I think it's really, cool and blah, blah, blah. And the elders just embraced me completely and told me some traditional stories of what that rock art means and some of their beliefs that they had never told anybody. And I asked if I could, record all this and get it written down and stuff. And it was just an enlightenment in the sense of finding that those two things mixed together on a different level. I was always thinking of anthropology as studying Bigfoot as a physical, biological being of looking at body parts and, that kind of thing. It never dawned on me that I could mix the more powerful part of Native American traditions and Bigfoot as well. And so that kind of just set me on this path of how come nobody else is doing this? How come nobody is working with tribes and finding out what these traditional beliefs are? But, of course, there were people that were doing that. I just wasn't aware of it. I mean, this was pretty much before the Internet was going on and really having a wider access to what kind of information was out there. But so, yeah, I was already a Bigfooter who became an anthropologist who became a bigger footer, I guess is the word I would use. Sure. It's all just been always part of my world.
Well, I mean, obviously these drawings that you're referring to left quite an impact, because you even used it on the cover of your book, Giants, Cannibals, and Monsters.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
so
I do. That is actually a painting by Brendan Bett. I'm going to forget his name now. But it's a painting by a person, so the actual pictographs are pictured inside of them. They're not quite as bright as that, but that's Brendan Bannon who did that painting.
I'm looking at it right now, actually, and it's actually pretty cool, and the book looks pretty cool. I have to order that book. But
yeah, it's a really beautiful book because inside it's the traditional stories, plus it's got photos of the traditional people that are from the 1800s, and it's just really a nice, unsanitized group of stories that you can read and just enjoy for what it is that they are. So
sure. So you mentioned that the Native Americans were telling you, what the symbols meant to them. What did it mean to them? I mean, can you kind of fill us in on that if you don't mind?
Oh, well, Bigfoot, or Hairy Man, is what he's known. Maya Dekdek is his traditional Yokich word for him. He's very important to the tribe. He's helped create man in their creation story. If it wasn't for him, we'd walk on all fours like Coyote wanted us to, but he wanted us to walk on two legs to be special. And he still has a very powerful presence in their culture today. When somebody dies, he's the one that comes and gets their spirit and takes them to the other side, to the green. And so they have a traditional song, which I play when I give talks. I play the traditional song of asking Hairy Man to come and to open the door to the other side. And it's sung by Melba Whitebear, and she unfortunately has passed away. And in fact, one time, one of the most special things that ever happened was a Yokich. To the Indian reservation, actually, they're Yokich. It's what their traditional ethnographic name is. They don't like that name necessarily because they want to call themselves what they want to call themselves. Sure. But a gentleman had passed away on the tribe, and his cousin was standing outside and saw a Bigfoot walking along the ridge, and she knew from her traditional beliefs that he was coming to come get his soul and take him over. And she reported that to the Bigfoot Research, Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, BFRO, when I was a member of them a long time ago. And I was able to talk to them, like, literally within 2 days of that event. And she was pretty shook up, and she just kind of, and he did too, there was another man that was with her, unleashed on, we've always been taught this. This is always something we've been told happens, and to see it was just amazing. And so it's still very much part of their culture that Bigfoot lives on the reservation. He has a special place. It's his. They try not to, bug him when they don't need to. And even he himself still has a lot of passion for Painted Rock, where he painted himself, and he'll hang around in that area quite a bit. And so it's I haven't been back there in many years, and I hope to have gotten back by now, but I just, time is always, gets away from me, whatever I do. But yeah, it's a unique relationship. And a lot of tribes that I work with right around here are the Miwok, and their relationship is one of similar. You know, that he's part of their daily life. He's no different than coyote or bear or panther, or not panther, but mountain lion.
Mountain lion, sure.
So it's just part of their life.
Sure. And it's funny because I've read, at least I tried to read some of the Native American ideology of what a Bigfoot is, and I've heard everything from basically the husband of Mother Nature to the guardian of the forest, and so different views and different ideas. I just find it intriguing, and I love to hear as many different stories and ideas as possible. And I think we all should, because that's how we're going to base our opinion. And the bottom, overall, that's how we get our opinion. But I think it's very interesting. So you kind of stumbled on the book then. You just kind of fell in, which is great. I mean, that's awesome. So
yeah, and I think there's a lot of people that were influenced by Legend of Boggy Creek for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, you go back to that movie and you think about it. You know what it was that got me? What really scared me about it wasn't so much the Bigfoot, it was the music. The music scared me.
It's that scream at the beginning where it goes, the statement, he always follows the creeks.
Yes, yeah. Well, I want to stay away from the creeks. No, it was a great movie, and it definitely left an impact. And I had an opportunity to meet Lyle Blackburn, who has done a lot of work in that area, and wow, what another great guy. So, Kathy, were there any surprises, something that maybe you hadn't heard before, or maybe just something unexpected with the stories of the Native Americans and their history?
Oh, probably not. I think what was more startling is that they were willing to share those stories with me. They just really took a liking to the fact that I was there to talk about what did they want to do with this archaeological site that we were going to excavate. And we had thought that it was what we call an ethnographic village, which is a village that somebody during, I hate to use these terms, but basically a white person saw Indians living there, asked them, hey, why are you here? What's the name of this village? And got information and wrote it down. That's all ethnographic means. And we had thought this village that I was excavating at the time was this particular village, and it ended up that it was much older than that. But they were just really grateful and accommodating that I was there to ask them what did they want to do. What information do you want me to get? What do you want me to report back to you? Do you want to be there when I'm doing it? And, tribal relations throughout the years have sometimes been rocky with different tribes where a lot of people just don't show respect, that's their history, and we should be asking the people that those sites are associated with, what do they want us to do? And I've always been a leader, I guess, in that kind of consultation where I've always had a very good working relationship with our local tribes, because that's what I do. I ask them, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? Do you want to be there when we're doing it? Do you not want me to do that? Kind of thing. And so I think it was just my first foray into that kind of asking permission of what do you want to do, and then being so receptive, so much so that they're even telling me, what their traditional beliefs were. I think that was the more startling thing, and that other tribes had this kind of information. And I was also in that kind of mode of being a Pacific Northwest snob, that the only people that would have those kinds of traditions were probably tribes here that were local and in Washington, Oregon, and California, British Columbia, that type of thing. And then back in like 2000 and let's say 6 or 7, probably 6, Craig Woolheater, who at the time was the chair of the Texas Bigfoot Conservancy, contacted me. He wanted me to give a talk at the University of Texas in San Antonio. And I was like, well, if I'm going to give a talk in Texas, I should be talking about, local traditional beliefs. And so it kind of made me dive into what other tribes outside the Pacific Northwest has stories. And I was shocked. was shocked that there were so many stories from Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and I was like, well, who else has stories? And that's what kind of led to the idea of the book, was these belief systems are not just a Pacific Northwest issue. They are all the way through the United States. They're all the way through Canada. They're in Alaska. I've then published the book, and since that time I've been doing research in South America as well, and have found the same traditions. And I gather songs, dances, pieces of artwork that represent what they believe this hairy man, which is a pretty standard term that's used. It's wild man of the forest, wild land of the jungle. You know, those types of stories are very commonplace. And it's, for me, because it's so widespread, it doesn't make any logical sense that this is just some sort of made-up story that all these tribes held. I mean, that's not even logical. It's not like they had the internet or a telephone and could call and talk to each other and say, hey, guess what, you know, you should believe in this because I believe in this. You know, there's none of that going on. These are all independently determined stories that they universally have. Well, why is that? The only other universal character in both North and South America is coyote. He is traditionally a trickster, and that's really wide held, you know, that he had these characteristics that he was, if something bad's going to happen, it's always coyote's fault. Well, that tells me they were observing behavior of coyotes that made them feel like he had that trait. You know, obviously he can't talk or anything like that, but I think those stories are based on observations of what the tribes themselves were seeing and what they felt best described that animal. And so for me, because Bigfoot is so widespread, that it's a similar thing. They observed those behaviors personally from a real animal and captured those traits in their traditional story.
Sure. So let me ask you one more question about this, because I find this fascinating. Do you think, or did you hear, that whether or not Bigfoot sightings in the Native Americans, were they really rare or were they more common?
They were very common. And I've spoken with a lot of Native Americans. I mean, I didn't just, you know, read their stories and put it in a book. I mean, I've spoken to many people.
Sure.
And some of the best ones is, of course, here in California, just because they're just, very open and willing to discuss the issue. Some people not so much. And it was common enough that they would tell their kids, hey, you're going to experience this. And one tribe up it's the Yurok up in Six Rivers National Forest, where the famous Patterson Gimlin film was taken, where she grew up, and her mom had always told her, hey, you're going to see these things, and they're going to want them to come with you. And you're going to have to say no to them. And she said, well, why do I say no to them? She goes, well, because they're not your people. They have different dances. They have different traditions, and you don't want to go with them. But they're going to want you to go with them. And she kept emphasizing that. My mom was very adamant to say, I'm not going with you. And those tribes up there have a very strong belief that Bigfoot steals children, sometimes bees, but sometimes raises their own children. And so that was what I thought was being conveyed to her. Don't go. They're going to want to try to steal you and resist as much as you can. That's what she was being told. Sure. And then in Washington and Oregon, it's very common for the tribes there to tell you that they run into Bigfoot so much that they just ended up just dividing like berry picking areas, where this patch would be Native American patch, but that patch over there is Bigfoot's patch. And that way, you guys, they had equal share of the berries, and they wouldn't have to fight over who got what.
Sure, they just coexist.
So, but
interesting.
Yeah.
So while you're at work and you're doing, your job, have you found or seen anything that kind of makes you scratch your head and go, that could be Bigfoot related?
The only time I've ever seen anything while I was on the job was I was doing a survey of a site. I was trying to get it flagged, and the people I were with kind of just dropped me off and went to go look at this other issue that was going on. And in the middle of where the survey area was a power line, and our local power company, PG&E, had come through and obviously had recently done a little bit of tree clearing. And the soil was kind of loose, and right in the middle of this pathway was this gigantic footprint. And I was like, holy crap. And, of course, for whatever reason, I remember I had to get in the car and just kind of go, flag, and look at this area, so I hadn't really taken that much equipment. And I didn't have a camera on me, although later my husband told me, he goes, well, you had your phone, and your phone could have taken a picture. But I never used my phone for that purpose. It's a flip phone. I don't have one of those modern things.
Sure.
And I followed there was only a single print, and one print had crossed this line, and I could see where something had then gone up into what we call bear clover and made a pathway. So I followed it as far as I could until I kind of lost where it was going, and plus the folks had come back to get me, and I showed them the print, and I said, what do you guys think of that? And they were like, well, that's interesting. And so when I got back to the office, and I called my husband, and I said, maybe you should go. Tom Yamarone was coming up that day, I guess, for something else already. And so I gave him them directions, pointed on the map where it was, and I said, can you guys go, get a picture of this and cast it? And by the time they ended up getting up there, it was dark, and they ended up on a wrong road. This is a whole long saga. So they didn't end up seeing it. But other than that, on the job, I haven't. Oh, that's not true. I'm thinking more modern.
Sure.
When I was on the Sequoia National Forest, long time ago. Oh my God, man! I've been in the U.S. Forest Service for 25 years, so I would say this would be like 1992, something like that. When I was hiking in probably the most remote area of the Sequoia National Forest. I was doing a survey where we were going to log what we call now a near roadless area, where there's vast areas that don't have any roads. And this area is so remote, and I actually got helicoptered in one time, and that's a whole other story because I got injured during the event. I remember out there hiking, and I had stopped to just take a rest because I was like several miles in. And I heard somebody talking, and it sounded like gibberish, like Japanese, like I just couldn't, there was no words I could make out, I could just hear the talking. And I'm like going, well, what the hell is somebody doing out here this far? What? And I didn't hear a return voice, it was just like one person talking, and so it was like this person talking to themselves. And I kept stopping and listening, and I'd walk a little more and listen, and that is probably one of the weirdest things that has ever happened to me. And then later on, after I finally heard the Sierra sounds that were recorded, actually right here above Sonora where I am now, I don't know that it is, but it was just something interesting that they had mentioned that they could hear this gibberish type of sound, but I've never heard anything like that in the field. I have since in Area X heard one little tiny version of that, but it was much closer and much more distinct. That was just like, even if I tried to, I couldn't have been able to walk to it because seemed like you couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. But those are the only two on-the-job ones that I can think of. But we've had other employees have experiences in the woods and immediately come in and say, Kathy, this is what happened to me today. What do you think? And some of them have just been, oh, it's just nothing. Don't worry about that. And
Sure.
Other ones have been very intriguing where I went, oh, well, that was interesting. So and very remote.
Well, I got to ask this question. You work for the U.S. Forest Service. Do you find that a lot of people who work for the U.S. Forest Service or in the woods, do you find that a lot of them do kind of believe in Bigfoot, or do you find that they think it's silly?
Well, I've never had, I'm very well known as being a Bigfooter in my forest. I mean, it's not a secret of any way, shape, or form, and it's actually, it had several funny incidences where I thought somebody was, I can tell the story just because it's funny. And in the parking lot at one of our districts. So I work in the main office, and all my individual district arcs work on a district. Excuse me. And I was in the parking lot. We had just come out. Oh, no, we were just going into the field, and I'm waiting for one of my arcs to get their gear to get in the vehicle that we're going to be driving in. And I'm just sitting there, and these people are just staring at me, and I'm like going, why are they staring at me? And I'm like going, oh, God. And this happened last year, and we had 21 archaeologists that we hired for the rimfire last year. And this guy, out of the blue, just kind of comes up to the window, or I had heard somebody say, just go talk to her. Just go talk to her. And I'm like, oh, crap. You know, and so this guy comes up to my driver's window, and he goes, are you the forest archaeologist? And I said, yeah. And I'm expecting this person to launch into me about the archaeologists, that they're sloppy, they've been leaving the office as a mess, taking all the ice every morning, something that complains about my employees. And so I'm just like dreading, what this conversation is going to turn into. And this guy goes, and he's just hedging, just like he didn't want to confront me, and I'm just hedging, and I'm like, yeah. And he goes, are you that lady that does Bigfoot research? And I went, what? Yeah. And then he just launches into this like, oh my God, this is all, and I'm like going, dude, we're on the clock. Why are we talking Bigfoot, And I just let him, get it out of him what he wanted to say. And I said, well, contact me anytime you want to. But it was just so like, what? How did you know that about me? And then I'm like, oh, well, okay, everybody knows that about me. But it sometimes I forget about it. But yeah, we do have, I think on the vast majority, nobody gives me any hard time or treats me bad or anything to that effect. Nobody has ever even teased me about being a Bigfooter. And I don't know that I would say most people believe. I don't think anybody really thinks about it in the sense of, if I go out, what if I do? I don't think anybody thinks that. I think they're just doing their job. And if they see something that they can't explain and they think is a little weird, then they'll come back and they'll tell me, and I'll go, well, no, that's not something I've ever heard associated with Bigfoot. And like I said, we've had a few that have been quite intriguing and unnerving events that I don't have an explanation for other than it was probably Bigfoot related, but the person didn't outright see the Bigfoot, so we don't know. But we do have a wildlife biologist that had a full-on sighting. He had been in my favorite Bigfooting area on the forest, had coming back from an aquatic survey, had come across a dead deer with a broken leg, and he thought that was odd, but he kept on walking back to his truck and came across another deer that was alive but was just standing there shaking, and it was covered in sweat, but obviously had been running for a long period of time, and he was able to touch the deer. The deer didn't care that he was there at all. He touched it, but the deer was looking uphill, and he turned to see what the deer had been looking at, and he saw a Bigfoot walking kind of away from him, and never acknowledged him, never did anything, just kind of walked along its way, and it scared him so badly that when he got in his truck, he then went back to the office, told his supervisor, who was Kathy Burnett, and my archaeologist, Lisa DeHart, was there at the same time, told him what he had seen, and he quit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was that's it. I'm not interested in this. This is too much for me, and just bold face quit. And I didn't know the gentleman at the time, although I was on the forest, and after I heard that this whole bit, it actually didn't come to me from Lisa or Kathy Burnett. It came from me through my contacts with the BFRO. Matt Moneymaker, I hunted him down, found him, and interviewed him, and he said this is going to be the only time I talk about it, and he told me the story, and I then interviewed Kathy, the supervisor, and my archaeologist that was there at the time. Story matched exactly what he had told them, and he just, it was too much for him. It was just, not something he ever wanted to experience, and he said he would never work in the field again, that he was going to be a desk jockey from there on out, and that was it.
Huh.
So.
Wow, that's a really cool story. And it reminds me a little bit of a video I had seen, and although there was no Bigfoot in the video, I think it was if I'm not mistaken, and it could be, but I was thinking it was a father and a daughter who were walking down a little path, and out of nowhere, the deer come out of the woods and run right towards them and run right past them. You know, and they're like running. I mean, they're like, you know, hauling butt. And you gotta wonder, you know, it's odd, I would think anyway, first that a deer would run past humans, and then you gotta wonder what were they running from? You know, it was just an interesting video that, even though it didn't show anything, it didn't, you know, there was nothing Bigfoot, you know, concrete Bigfoot evidence or anything like that, but it was definitely interesting. I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's along those lines. That's some really cool stories, and I appreciate you sharing those.
Yeah.
Let's go into what you're doing off work now. I mean, do you ever go out where you work, you know, with your research?
Oh yeah. One of our, you know, I'm very fortunate that we live very close to the Stanislaus National Forest. We can go Bigfooting within an hour. You know, you'd probably go Bigfooting within a half an hour, but I prefer getting up a little deeper into the forest.
Sure.
Our usual spot where we would have an annual Bigfoot expedition with friends and stuff was now within the rim fire, and so it's destroyed. So there won't be any Bigfoot stories coming out of there for a while, but we actually had quite a bit of success where we would, here in California, we do a lot of call blasting just because the land is just conducive to it, and we would get a lot of responses back from that, and probably scared more than a few people in our own time, but again, that's going to be about 100 years before that area is, you know, suitable for wildlife habitat again. So we have to shift higher up in elevation, which takes longer to get to, and but yeah, we Bigfoot here on a pretty regular basis to, you know, our usual spots, and with some years are better than other years being successful, and you know, the usual. It's 99% going out and 0.001% of anything ever happening. So
Sure.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about your team. Do you go out with the same people? I know your husband is really involved as well. By the way, another great guy. It's fun to meet him too. But tell us a bit about your team and kind of what you do.
Okay, well, generally, we are members and on the board of directors for the Alliance of Independent Bigfoot Researchers, which is the AIBR, and that's just a group of independent researchers from all over the United States that we just adhere to a scientific, ethical method of Bigfooting. You don't take a picture of a footprint with not a measuring tape in it. You know, you do standardized scientific methods that you would apply in archaeology and other scientific fields. And so Tom Yamarone, you know, Dave Osborne, there's quite a few local people that we work with. Of course, after the fire, it's been kind of hard to regroup getting together because it shook us up so bad. And plus, I haven't had as much time in the last 2 years to really do a lot of stuff. I work a lot of weekends and a lot of hours just trying to get through this process of getting, you know, all that land surveyed and the sites treated and all that stuff that goes on it. But the other group that we do probably our most work with is the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, which is the NAWAC, that Bob gave a talk on there at Beachfoot. And they're mostly based out of Texas, but they have members in Oklahoma, Minnesota, us in California. And they do their research in an area called Area X in Oklahoma. And that's where we have spent, when we have the time, our most time at. So first year we went was 2012. We spent a week there. Next year, Bob and I went separately and spent 3 weeks each there. Last year we spent 2 weeks, and we're going to be there again very soon for 2 weeks. And it's just an incredible, I wouldn't use the word habituation, but it does continuously have activity and regular sightings and rock throws and all kinds of activity. And so it's pretty intriguing it's one of those places where it's hell to go to. It's kind of, we call it embrace the suck. It's not a fun place just because it's in Oklahoma, first of all, and it's hot, and it has everything's trying to kill you, the snakes, the vegetation, all that stuff that's in the area. But you just can't help yourself wanting to go because it just has so much stuff going on. It's an anthropology's dream because, you get to witness what we call wood ape behavior on such a close manner. It's just, I don't even know how to convey how exciting the area is.
Well, yeah, actually, it's an interesting subject because I interviewed actually a gentleman named Dale Ryan, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but he was a very, very nice guy. And he told a story about that location, and Bob's story, your husband Bob's story, Bigfoot, was almost verbatim, word for word. Mm-hmm. So it gave some credibility to not only what Bob was saying, but also what Dale told me. So that's very, very interesting. Kind of scary, actually. And mm-hmm. I find that very interesting. So, what have you experienced at the Area X? You personally?
Well, quite a bit. We've in 2012, the first year that we went, we actually weren't members at the time, but we were asked to go to kind of, see what was going on, give us some thoughts. What could they be doing different or better, or what did we think, of the place? Because Alton Higgins and Brian Brown are on the board of directors and very good friends of ours for a very long period of time. And so we went, and nothing happened. First day, it was kind of quiet. And then it's such a long story, so I won't make it too long because you obviously already heard it and people can watch it on Bob's presentation. But essentially, Monday, the second day we were there. Then we got there on a Saturday. Saturday nothing happened. Sunday nothing happened. So this is Monday. And we had rock throws happening because there's 4 cabins there. And these rock throws are so dramatic, too. They just scare the jeebers out of you because it just sounds like a bullet, bam, and you're like, crap. And everybody was in the habit of, running to each time a rock gets thrown, you run into the place where it was thrown and you do an investigation, get the rock, blah, blah, blah. And I was like not so much into like running around like a chicken just because I'm naturally very klutzy, and I knew if I just kind of ran head first through the forest I was going to fall down and hurt myself. So I was trying not to hurt myself right off the bat.
Sure.
And so Bob and there was 5 of us there at the time, so the 4 guys left to go investigate this rock throw. And while I'm waiting for them returning, I'm just kind of, looking around, making sure nothing sneaks up on me, behind me, bear, anything, not just Bigfoot, any animal sneak up on me.
Sure. And
I see this branch in this bush slowly go back to its position, like something had pushed it down. And I was like, well, that's really odd. So when they come back, there's another rock throw on another cabin, and they dutifully run after it. But I had asked them, I said, hey, there's something in that bush. And they kind of sort of looked, and they went, no, Kathy, there's nothing in that bush. And I was like, okay, whatever. And so I ended up making Bob stay while they ran off to the other rock throw. And I said, Bob, could you really look in there? Because, man, I don't see how, if there was something in there that it just ran away. Can you look and just see? He sticks his head in, and he looks, and he's looking really hard. And by now, it was about 6 o'clock when this whole process started, and I swear it felt like it happened in 10 minutes. But now it's, at least 20 minutes have passed or something to that degree. And so there's shadows, and he looks in there, and he goes, no, honey, there's nothing in here but a couple of logs. And I said, great. So they come back, and we're all sitting around our vehicles, and there's a fire pit, but there's no fire going because it's just way too hot for that. And all of a sudden we hear something that sounds like somebody walking. And we're like going, well, what's that sound? And we were like, well, that's, it sounds like somebody walking. And I'm looking right down this place we call the Bottleneck. And all of a sudden, there's 2 Bigfoot coming right at us. You know, they're walking along the edge of the hillside, and it looks like they're trying to go, like, probably behind the shed. Well, for what purpose, I have no idea. And I really didn't pay much attention to the smaller of the two because it was, the big one was so big, it was off, you're just transfixed on it.
Sure.
And I yell, there they are, and I jump up and I run at them. I don't know what I was going to do by running at them, but I didn't want to be that person who said, yeah, I saw this, and I just sat there.
Right.
So one of the researchers didn't see anything because he didn't get up. He just kind of sat in his chair, but the other, Mark, Bob, and Brian Brown also saw what I saw and ran with me up there. And we did have a camera, a motion sensor camera aimed at the general area, but it was me who triggered it when I ran past it, and so I used to use my butt. And the second I started at them, I personally erased that because I was like, no, this is not funny. And I was like, this will be, somebody will use this against me later.
It's a little
funny. Oh yeah, it is up on the internet. So the second I started running at them, the big one, obviously saw that I was coming and bolted up that hillside like you've never seen anything in your life. I mean, it was the fastest thing I've ever seen. It was silent. It was quick, but yet it was so graceful at the same time where it was just amazing. The animal kind of bent over on, into like a power runner stance. So tucked its elbows up to its side, but could, use their fists to move their arms and kind of leaned over at the waist and just went boom right up that hillside. And then the second one, I don't even remember what it did. I didn't watch it. I was totally watching the big one. And that actually is a pretty funny story because by the time we got there, I don't know why I'm just animated and I even said to Bob, I turned around and I said, I told you they were still there because it looked like they had come right from that same bush. Had just been there the entire time and came at me. And I'm just yelling and screaming, and I don't know why in particular, but it was just the stress of the whole event. I was having a moment of shock, and I was trying to get myself out of it. But then the next morning, I get up, and the second I walk outside, the air is just so heavy and just, I could just tell something was wrong, that there was this feeling of, oh, my God, kind of thing. And I'm like going, oh, something bad happened, and I'm looking at everybody and they're all like looking pale and just like, oh my God, what happened? And Bob turns to me and he goes, Kathy, and I said, yeah, and he goes, yesterday, and I said, yeah, and he goes, how many logs did I tell you were in that tree? And he said, honey, there's just a couple of logs in there, and he said, I said, what's the problem? He goes, well, guess how much is there now? And I was like, are you serious? And there was me, I was, again, repeated, I told you they were still there. But then it kind of dawned on me then what had happened was that they had been laying on the ground. And in Bob's mind, he was seeing logs because they were just lying still because they'd been caught. They were trapped. They chose not to flee at that point. They just decided to lay still on the ground. Bob clearly saw them. In his mind, he saw logs. And the first opportunity they got to bolt, they probably thought we were still gone, at the other rock throw, and thought they had a clear path to get past it. And so to think that, it's still kind of, unfortunately for Bob, he still gets made fun of quite a bit in the group about this whole thing.
Hey, I'll tell you what, that is a very interesting story. That's very cool. I mean, I guess I'd like to go there sometime. I'd like to experience that. But to see what you saw with the big one you talked about in the detail of how it was running, tucking its elbows up and running, like a runner,
mm-hmm.
that it was. Now at that time, you said it was nighttime at that time, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, just unbelievably fast. I think Bob said it would move like they were on a bungee cord, like somebody had just released a bungee cord, because it was just unbelievably quick. And I remember even turning to Bob the next day and going, why are we here? But we should just go home now because I just felt like there's no way to win. If that thing decided to grab me and go, there isn't a thing Bob could have done about it. I'd just be gone. And it was that kind of feeling like, we can't ever win this game because they're always going to be faster. They're always going to be smarter than us. And it was really kind of, just this feeling of, I've always wanted to see one. Now I've seen one. Now I'm not sure. I'm glad I saw one, kind of thing. Because it was everything people had said they were, but to a level where you couldn't, nobody on earth would believe it unless they saw it themselves. I mean, once you see it, it literally is life changing.
Now, was the hill? Was it? And I agree. It would be life changing. But the hill that it ran up, was it pretty wooded, or was it just a bare hill? Or
no, it was wooded and had a lot of deadfall on it. Greenbrier was very rocky, and it was a good slope. We couldn't. It did a distance that they did in seconds. Would have taken us at least 10 minutes, at least, to just even go half the way. And they went to this thing we call the ledge. It's this little natural contour on the mountain, and they stopped there because then one of the other members could see the big one's head walking across it. So it was a natural travel way up there, and they just made it in no time flat. So, in fact, I've only ever been up there one or two times myself because it's so treacherous for at least, somebody who's not as skilled foot-wise, that I've only been up there a few times, and it's hazardous to walk. I mean, you have to carefully place your foot so that you don't, take one step forward, two steps back.
Right. So I guess my question would be, how does this thing run through the trees at that speed at dark? When you, do you think they have? And I want to use this term lightly because I don't know, but do you think they see better at night? Are their eyes more adapt to see better at night? Do you think?
Yes, I do. I think they have the much better night vision than we do. Sure. Much, much better. Yeah, and plus I think they've been up and down that mountain. That's like asking somebody, how do you go to a supermarket and have a blindfold on and know what you're buying? Well, I've been there 10,000 times. I know what's in each aisle. I know, about where it's at. They've been up and down that hill God knows how many times.
Sure. Well, that's fascinating. That is simply fascinating. Well, Kathy, I'll tell you what, listen, I want to go into something, one more thing real quick, and that is when recently I've been letting people know, hey, if there's someone you want to hear on the show, let me know, and I'll see if I can, get them on the show. No guarantees, obviously, but I'll do my best. The first person to respond mentioned you. So first of all, that's an honor. Out of everyone who they could have picked, they picked Kathy Strain, which I thought was really great. But the lady's name is Debbie Boyce, and I haven't had a whole lot of contact with her other than talking about this interview. And she has a question for you, so I want to read this question for you. And
okay.
So Debbie Boyce, here's your question, and Kathy's going to answer for you. The question would be, does you, think there is a connection between the Bigfoot creatures being a hybrid alien/early human/ape?
Okay. Well, thank you, Debbie, for the question. No, I don't think that Bigfoot's anything other than an animal. Their behavior, everything that they do is so well documented in the sense of when you read Jane Goodall's books about the chimps, they're exact matches to that. They're just an ape. They're a really big ape, and apes are smart animals. In the scheme of things, they're actually very, very bright animals, but their behavior that they seem to emulate is all chimp related. So I think they're just an ape, flesh and blood ape from this world.
Sure. So it's just so you think it's just another species of an ape, basically large primate. Gotcha.
Correct. And we're apes too. The humans are in the ape family.
Sure.
So I don't believe that they're human in any way, shape, or form. Are they closely related to humans? Yeah, I would say that they are. How close, well, we won't know until we get DNA. So, but yeah, just an ape, and just, you know, curious about us, wondering what we're doing out there, and you know, I don't necessarily believe in the stories that they are potentially dangerous, but you know, who knows? Who knows? You know, it's always a risk when you're in the outdoors for any animal. You know, mountain lion, bear. I mean, we've had a bear attack here just in the last few days, and Yellowstone had a fatality to a bear attack. I mean, being outside is just being outside, but I don't believe that their intention, if they had wanted to kill me or take me at Area X, they had every opportunity, and they didn't choose to do so.
Sure.
So, which I'm happy about.
Well, we're glad as well. And so something you just said actually leads me to one more question that I think would be fascinating to hear your answer. You mentioned, you know, until we get DNA. As someone with a scientific background, and what do you think we need to do to get that DNA?
Well, as much as, you know, people don't like to hear it, we don't have any choice anymore. We need a body. And that's science. As an anthropologist and an archaeologist, I routinely collect specimens. I have office and a museum full of artifacts that I collect that demonstrate the presence or no presence of an archaeological site. So it's not, you know, something I'm unfamiliar with. And so, and yeah, it's not necessarily the funnest thing to think of because they are an animal, and I'm a huge animal lover. I have dogs and cats and chickens and sheep and stuff, and I love my animals very much. So, but we're at a point where tree harvesting, all that stuff that's going on out there is putting habitat at risk. And we can either continue to think that, well, we'll just, you know, be able to get DNA off of the blah, 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 and keep waiting and keep waiting and keep waiting, and it never happened. And in the meantime, all that habitat that that animal needs to survive is lost. And so it's not a fun question, and I know there's a lot of people who are morally and ethically against it, but as a scientist, I have to use the scientific approach. And science dictates we have a specimen. We don't need 10. We don't need, 5. We need 1 where we can establish their DNA, their body type, do all kinds of work, then start putting resources towards listing as a threatened and endangered species through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and go from there. And it's a standard process, that I've talked with Fish and Game about many times. They know who I am and what I do, and are very actually supportive of that idea that there needs to be a body, and they're open to it. They're ready themselves for this to come about, and so and it's ethical. I know a lot of people again are be offended by what I'm saying, but we're an ethical group of people. There's not going to be any kind of immoral, dancing around with body parts or taking pictures. The body will never, ever be sold for any price to anybody. It belongs to science. The group will gladly give it to the responsible officials when the time comes, and it's for them to do research on and verify the find and all that stuff that goes with it. So there's nobody who's going to make any money. Nobody's ever going to know the name of the person who does this, because we're not about us. It's not about us. It's about the animal, and that's what we care about.
Well, that's interesting, and I guess my own personal view is that I hope, I don't want to see one killed, obviously, but on the same token, I definitely understand the fact that we have to have a body to run the test to classify this animal, and I guess it's okay to look at it as, take one to save many, and I hope that that's exactly what turns out to be the case. And I definitely wish you luck on those endeavors. So thank you for that candid answer, though.
Yeah, it's and it's a lot of resources to try to even get to that part, because everybody gives up their vacation and their time to be there, but we all have a strong belief as these catastrophic wildfires, like what I said happened to us here at the Rim Fire that took out 257,000 acres. Well, that's 257,000 acres less that any animal has to use now. And you can't keep doing that at the rate that, especially California's burning up. I think we have 27 fires going on right now in just the state of California, and that doesn't even count what's going on in Washington, Oregon, Alaska, and other states. And they're catastrophic. They're just taking out acres after acre after acre, and at some point you reach a threshold where animals just can't continue to live in this area, and they leave and they try to find other areas to go to, and guess what? When you go to another area, there's already animals there, and then you start competing for those resources, water, food, all those things that go together, and, it doesn't ever have a good outcome. There's never a good outcome for any of that.
Right. Well, Kathy, I couldn't agree more, and, I guess I hope that we find one that's already dead, but if it takes taking one to preserve and to help protect all the other ones, then that's what it's got to be. But well, Kathy, listen, thank you very much for taking the time today. This has been very, very interesting. I love the stories. I love to hear you talk, and maybe someday we'll have an opportunity to do it again.
Sure, anytime.
Well, it's been fun, and just let everybody know, stay tuned because we have some more great guests coming down the line. Kathy was great. We just wait till you see what we got coming. With that, we're out.